All right, so in this recording, we're going to take a look at the works of composers on my list that I have from numbers 16 all the way through 30. We're going to start with Hector Berlioz and go to Camille Saint-Saëns. Our first composer is going to be, as you see here, Hector Berlioz, whose most famous work is going to be Symphonie Fantastique. Symphonie Fantastique and Hector Berlioz are popular answer lines, and it includes, does Symphonie Fantastique, the elements of a witch's Sabbath, a march to the scaffold, and Dies Irae, which of course is the Latin translation for Day of Anger. Also, in the clues for Symphonie Fantastique, you often get what is known as an idée fixe, as it were. So if you hear any of those sorts of things, it's Hector Berlioz's Symphonie Fantastique. Always listen on the toss-up whether it's looking for this composer or this work. Here is, of course, the Dies Irae that I'll play for you for just a second. It's going to say ba, 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 and sounds kind of spooky. One would think so in the Symphonie Fantastique. So you can hear it here. And I'm going to zip ahead a little bit so you can hear more of it. So a rather iconic piece. You can hear the melody there. So, bum, bum. So you probably hear music like this around Halloween time. It sounds rather ominous. And again, also in Symphonie Fantastique, you have the March to the Scaffold and the, of course, Witch's Sabbath. So keep those in mind. Other works for Hector Berlioz that you need to know is going to be Harold in Italy, which he, of course, was inspired by when he won the Prix de Rome, which was kind of like a scholarship. I think he won it in like 1830 or something like that, to where he got to obviously live in Italy at the Medici Palace for a while. And indeed, Harold in Italy is going to emerge from that. So Hector Berlioz, winner of the Prix de Rome, a scholarship, and of course the composer of Symphonie Fantastique. We move on to Felix Mendelssohn. Mendelssohn is going to be a also romantic composer. So all these guys that we're covering now are in the romantic period of the 19th century, and he has the Elijah Oratorio that you see there on the left-hand side, the Hebrides, and A Midsummer Night's Dream, which is obviously of the same name as the Shakespeare's play. So whenever your answer line is A Midsummer Night's Dream, it could be the musical piece as composed by Mendelssohn that obviously takes its content from Shakespeare's Midsummer Night's Dream. So that is what you have for Felix Mendelssohn. Now we move on to Frédéric Chopin, a Polish-French master of the piano, and he is going to be the composer of several etudes. Etude is a musical composition designed in order to work on your technical ability, so it's really kind of like what you would play if you wanted to get better as a student. You also have his mazurkas and his polonaises, as it were. His most famous piece is probably his Minute Waltz, but there's a whole variety of others. I'm not going to play his top 10 pieces that you see here, but necessarily there's a whole bunch of them for Chopin. So you might want to, if you're studying Quizbowl, take just a second and go get to the PowerPoint yourself, click on here and see those top 10 pieces as played. I said I wasn't going to, but I will anyway, just to take a listen to a couple of them. So you see this is the Fantaisie Impromptu. I'm mispronouncing the first word, certainly, but oh well, that is Chopin. Chopin's lover was, of course, George Sand. It often comes up with a clue for him. But again, he has etudes, mazurkas, polonaises, and, of course, the Minute Waltz is most famously by Chopin. We move on to Robert Schumann and his wife, Clara. So we have the reason that I put next to Robert Schumann and his wife Clara Franz's list is because if we were to go and look it up, and let's do so, Clara Schumann, we're going to see that there was a man in love with Clara Schumann. and that is a fellow that's going to be coming up in a bit. That would be Brahms. And so we can look really quickly here. Clara Schumann, this is Robert's wife, of course, that you can see here. Together, they encouraged Johannes Brahms and maintained a close relationship with him. And as a matter of fact, he was absolutely in love with Clara Schumann. And so it's important to understand those kind of personal relationships that you have amongst the composers when you are obviously studying them. So going back, obviously, so just be aware of both of them, Robert Schumann and his wife, Clara, who is a gifted piano player and keyboardist herself. Moving on. So we have Franz Liszt, and Franz Liszt is one of, if not the best keyboardist of the entirety of the 19th century and, of course, of the Romantic period. His hands were incredibly large, and I think I heard an anecdote one time told to me that there are some pieces that he has composed that the intervals are so far apart. Some piano players, because their hands are not as large as his, they're not able to obviously play them. He is the creator of the symphonic poem, and there you can see some of the symphonic poems that he is responsible for. Hungaria, Heroide Funebre, Le Triomphe Funebre du Tasse. You don't need to know these. These will not come up. Just know that he is the composer and the inventor of the symphonic poem. His most famous work is most likely Hungarian Rhapsodies, which harkens back to his own home of Hungary, as it were. And as I said before, just an absolute genius at the keyboard. And here is Hungarian Rhapsody number 2, which, of course, he is most famously known. Well, that's enough of that, but it is a rather famous opening and incredibly famous piece. So we move on to Johann Strauss. As you see, he is the waltz king, the absolute waltz king. Now, he has other works that you need to know as well that I don't know that I have slides for. One is Die Fledermaus, the bat, and of course Tales from the Vienna Woods. But most famously, he is the fellow who composes the Blue Danube, and you're going to recognize this instantaneously. Bom, 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 in that 3/3 time for which waltzes are of course known. Here we go. So hopefully you are watching and maybe making cards. Of course, it's a waltz, so it's in 3/4 time. It's one of those pieces that you might not know what it is, but you've definitely heard it because it is so pervasive and a part of our culture, civilization. I'm going to get past the intro in just a second, and you're going to hear that famous melody that is evoked here in the introduction. So if you would humor me, here we go. It's going to build up into a crescendo. Dun 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 dun. Dun dun dun. Dun dun dun. And here we go. Might have to zip ahead just a bit. No, I think we're hitting up to it. Here it comes. There it is. So there it is, the Blue Danube, his most famous work by far. But remember that he also does Johann Strauss, Die Fledermaus, and Tales from the Vienna Woods that often come up in Quizbowl. All right, and you have to say Johann because there is Richard Strauss, which, of course, will be coming up later in the next installment. So our next guy is Arthur Sullivan of Gilbert and Sullivan, and that is a pair. And, of course, for the music, it is Sullivan. Gilbert is the librettist. You have these kind of operettas that you need to know that come up quite a bit. You have the Pirates of Penzance. So over here, very and I'll be honest, I don't know if it's whether the HMS Pinafore or the Pirates of Penzance. I think it might be the HMS Pinafore that you have. I'm the very model of a modern Major General, which is a thing that comes up quite a bit. You might want to look that up. I don't even have it. Probably the one that might even be more known for them is the Mikado. So you have the Pirates of Penzance, you have the HMS Pinafore for Gilbert and Sullivan, and then, of course, you have the Mikado. So please know those and go and QuizDB or QB Reader them. QuizDB is a thing no more. All right, so now we have Alexander Borodin, who is he a member of the Mighty Five? I think he's a member of the Mighty Five. I think we need to look that up really quickly to make sure that we have that. So we're going to have Borodin, and let's see if he is one of the Mighty Five. And I'm looking here. Uniquely Russian, classical music, best known for his symphonies, string quartets, in the steppes of Central Asia for sure. Prince Igor, and as I said, he was a chemist. It comes up a lot that he is one of many, or not many, but one of few people in Quiz Bowl that are noted for obviously being expert in another. And so I'm going to look it up. The Mighty Handful. So we're going to go look and see if, here it is, the five. So we have Bilakarev, who was the leader. He composed a piece that was incredibly difficult for players on the piano, intentionally so. Cesar Cui, I don't know him. Mussorgsky, who's coming up in just a bit. Rimsky-Korsakov, who's coming in just a bit. And there it is, yes. Borodin was a member of the Five, or the Mighty Handful. This comes up quite a bit as well to know. But at any rate, let's go back to the PowerPoint. And so he was a member of the Mighty Five, or the Mighty Handful, or just simply known as the Five. And those are the two pieces which he is best known. You have Prince Igor and In the Steppes of Central Asia. And I think it is in Prince Igor that you have the Politvian dances. Yeah, there it is, the Politvian dances, or the Palatsvian dances. But unfortunately, you can't play it because the URL is not valid. But that's it for Borodin. He's a chemist. And in the steppes. And if you want to know what the steppes are, it's kind of like the grasslands that you have here in Central Asia, extending all the way from Mongolia up into Ukraine and Hungary, as it were. But it's a kind of a grassland, like we would have a savanna in the African area of the Middle South. You would have the same thing as the steppes in Asia. So we go on to our next guy. And Georges Bizet's opera, Carmen, really one of the most common and frequent operas that come up in Quiz Bowl at the high school level. So you would want to go and quickly read a synopsis of it. Carmen is the main character that is there. I think she's a gypsy girl. She works in a cigarette factory, and you have the habanera and the Toreador song, which are clues that often come up. And there it is. That is the Toreador song. So we're going to listen to it really quickly. Let's get to the meat of it. But you also have the habanera, which we don't have. So going back, unfortunately. So we're going to look up really quickly because, like I said, it's worthwhile to know some of the plot elements. And I think you also have the villain that is worth to be known, Carmen Opera. There it is. That's what we're looking for. And really quickly, you can see it's an opera comique. It's a comic opera, as it were. And we don't want some of the background, but that's what we want. So Carmen comes up as a clue. That's your gypsy girl who works at the cigarette factory. Don Jose Escamillo. So by knowing just simply those three names and the association therein, and then quickly, if you were to read a synopsis, as it were, you can see all the sort of stuff that goes down. So it looks like it's in 4 acts, and there it is. And it ends up with, unfortunately, it says right here, Carmen dying. But the 3 main characters that you need to know is Don Jose Escamillo, the Toreador himself, and then, of course, the main character, Carmen, the titular character, as Quiz Bowl often likes to say, because she is her name, the title, as it were, but comes up a lot. And just simply by knowing it, you're going to earn the points. So now we come to Johannes Brahms. Johannes Brahms is what is often considered to be the third of the 3 big B's of classical music. that would be, and please excuse my Roomba, it's off its spot and it's calling out for help. But oh well, that would be of course Bach, Beethoven, and Brahms. As we said before, he was in love with Clara Schumann, the wife of Robert Schumann. But the two things that come up for him by far the most are the Academic Festival Overture, the Tragic Overture, and a German Requiem, in which I think, and I got this right, I'm almost positive of it, that the German Requiem is set to the Luther Bible. I want to make sure on that. But we're going to go and make sure that we got that right. German Requiem. As I said, I'm making these videos off the top of my head, and so therefore I might have obviously gotten it a little bit goofy. But as it were, it says it here, words, large-scale work for chorus, orchestra, soprano, 7 movements, and unlike the long tradition of the Latin Requiem, is a Requiem in the German language. And so you can see it's Brahms' lingering feelings over Robert Schumann's death in 1856 may have been a motivation, but I think it has something to do with the Luther Bible. I'm almost positive of it, so I'm going to Control F, Luther, and there it is. That's the text. The text is from the Luther Bible, as I said, and so of course Luther being a German speaker, you can see what you have going on with that necessarily. So make sure that you know for Brahms. Also, Brahms comes up in Quizbowl quite a bit for the lullaby. Brahms is the composer of that lullaby. So we're going to look up Brahms really quickly, and maybe I can click on his name. Certainly, there it is. There's Brahms, and Control F, lull. There it is, the lullaby that he is most famous for. But at any rate, so that comes up quite a bit as well. So, and I think it's da-da-da, da-da-da, and so forth and so on. But I could be wrong because, like I said, I'm doing this off the top of my head. And we move on to the next one. But do know, Academic Festival Overture, Brahms. Tragic Overture, Brahms. And German Requiem, Brahms. Oh, I want to look it up too. Oh, it's his first symphony known as Beethoven's 10th. Let's see, Control F, Beethoven. We'll look up, see if it comes up again. Let's see. I could be having this wrong. There it is. So we go back. I saw it. That is exactly right. So Brahms' First Symphony is often referred to because it is so much in the same kind of style that it is called Beethoven's 10th. So that's something that could come up quite a bit. But at any rate, you need to know Brahms, Johannes Brahms. All right, so we move on and keep going. And the next guy is going to be Modest Mussorgsky. Mussorgsky, as we just saw a second ago, is one of the 5, the Mighty 5, Balakirev being the leader therein. And the only one that I've left out is Balakirev and that Cesar or Cesar Cui, whomever that might be. I don't know. I mean, it doesn't come up in Quizbowl, but the other 4 do. Balakirev does, but not as much as Mussorgsky, Rimsky-Korsakov, and Borodin. I would argue that probably the one that comes up the most here is probably Mussorgsky, and he has this famous pictures at an exhibition. I think there are 10 of them, as it were. They originally were for piano, but later they were, of course, orchestrated by none other than Maurice Ravel. He also has, and unfortunately, there it is, Night on Bear Mountain or Bald Mountain. But first we'll listen to The Great Gate at Kiev, which is the 10th of his Pictures at an Exhibition. And this, of course, is orchestrated by Maurice Ravel. So you can hear the rich orchestration. Originally, like I said, this was for piano. Let's skip into the middle. You can get a sense of it. And then to the end. There it is. So that would be number 10 of the Pictures at an Exhibition, The Great Gate at Kiev. And so we continue on. And the other thing that he's known for is Night on Bear Mountain. If you've ever watched Fantasia, you've heard it. And if you've ever watched any sort of thing associated with Halloween with animation, very often they will use it. It's important enough, and it's often called Night on Bald Mountain, things like that. But take it just a second and go and look it up on YouTube, and you'll see that you have heard it before. And it does sound awful spooky and awful scary, and all those other sorts of adjectives that go along with it. And his opera is Boris Godunov. Boris Godunov is, I think, a former Tsar of Russia. You have 2 operas by Russians that are titular Tsar operas. One is Boris Godunov, and that's the Mussorgsky one, and the other is Eugene Onegin, and that's the Tchaikovsky one. But there it is. You have Mussorgsky. And now we move on to another member of the Mighty Five, Nikolai Rimsky-Korsakov. So Rimsky-Korsakov is going to be from most noted for his compositions Scheherazade, which then, of course, is followed by Tsar Sultan, and the piece Flight of the Bumblebee is from that Tsar Sultan, originally for piano, and then, of course, the Snow Maiden, and you have heard before the Flight of the Bumblebee. I particularly like the Flight of the Bumblebee when it is played by a trumpet. It has more of that buzzing sound to it, but here, originally for the piano, you can hear what it sounds like, and so forth and so on. You've heard it before, but here it goes. It's only a minute 17, you can see. And here comes that. And by the very nature of a trumpet, I think it just sounds more like a bumblebee. So, but that's it. So it's Rimsky-Korsakov. That comes up quite a bit as he is the composer of Flight of the Bumblebee in Quizbowl. But we move on now to Peter Tchaikovsky, also a Russian, also 19th century, but definitely not a member of the Mighty Five. So let's not try and confuse him as a member of the Mighty Five. He certainly was not. Again, the ones that you need to know that come up in Quizbowl is the leader Balakirev. Then, of course, you have Mussorgsky, and followed by Rimsky-Korsakov, and then Borodin. But here is Tchaikovsky, probably the most famous of all Russian composers, not a member of the Mighty Five. And, of course, he is noted for his ballets Swan Lake, Sleeping Beauty, and the Nutcracker. Swan Lake, I think the main character in Swan Lake is like Odette or something of that nature, but that comes up quite a bit, so you want to go and take a look at it if you want to be a good music player. You also have his operas, Queen of Spades and Eugene Onegin. Again, you have Boris Godunov as Mussorgsky's opera and Eugene Onegin as Tchaikovsky's. His symphonies, number one has the nickname Winter Daydreams. Number 2 is The Little Russian. Number 3 is The Polish. And number 6 is Pathétique. If you remember from earlier, Beethoven has a sonata, the nickname Pathétique. But, of course, Tchaikovsky has a symphony that has the nickname Pathétique. And, of course, the famous 1812 overture that, of course, immortalizes a victory over Napoleon. And if we were to listen to it, it involves actual cannon fire in a production therein. And so we're going to get to the end in just a moment. And eventually get dun 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 with the blast of the cannon. So we speed it up. So there we go. So you can hear that kind of musical motif. And so forth and so on. So we get to the very end, to the finale. It's winding down, and then for the big flourish finale, and go. And you can see in the background of this YouTube video, they have St. Basil's Cathedral in Moscow with those onion domes. And so we're coming to the big, you can see it's coming up. And you would have actual cannons firing during it. Oh, you heard the cannon fire. You heard the cannon fire again. So there it is. That's the 1812 Overture by Tchaikovsky. All right, so we move on to Giuseppe Verdi, whose name literally is the Italian form of Joe Green. He is the master of the Italian opera, especially in the 19th century. And all of these come up all the time. So you've got to know who the composer of these operas are. You have Nabucco, which is not even included in this PowerPoint, but Aida comes up all the time. Ethiopian princess, set in Egypt. You have the characters of Radames, and then the titular character of Aida. Important to know. Go and quickly look at the synopsis and make sure you know if at the minimum know Radames as a character name along with Aida, the titular character. Rigoletto comes up all the time. Just make it binary memorization. Verdi, Rigoletto. And in Rigoletto, you have one of the most famous operas that come up in the Quiz Bowl activity, and that is La Donna Immobile, Women Move Around. And of course, Pavarotti, who, as I said before, and I'll say it again, one of the most famous tenors ever to live. You have in the early part of the 20th century, Enrico Caruso. Then in the last part of the 20th century, you have Pavarotti, who for a time there in the 90s was a member of a group of three tenors that they went touring. They were called, obviously, the Three Tenors. And they, of course, were quite the phenomenon. But of the three tenors, the super duper star was, of course, Pavarotti himself. So here we go. La Donna Immobile. It's in 3/4 time, like a waltz. I'm quite a fan of La Donna Immobile. But the answer line will be Rigoletto. It'll be like the first words out of Power. So there it is. Know the story of Rigoletto. So we move on to the next one, La Traviata, also Verdi, and Otello on the left-hand side, and then Falstaff, both of which, obviously, taken from Shakespeare. But the ones that come up the most are Rigoletto and Aida. Aida may be the one that comes up the most. Now we move on to German opera and Wagner. He is, I think, the founder of the Bayreuth Festival, so lots of his works and his operas are going to, of course, debut at the Bayreuth Festival. He is the fellow for German opera and the composer of a series of operas that are known as the Ring Cycle, as it happens to be. He very often was venerated by the kinds of ideas of German superiority that would manifest itself eventually into Nazism in the 1930s. And his music was played in concentration camps and things like that as a veneration of the German nationality. But he is famous for his operas, and they were tremendously long. They were like twice as long as most other operas. But here you have the Ring of the Nibelung, which is the series of these. You have, obviously, the Rheingold, the Walküre, which, of course, features the Ride of the Valkyries, I think, Siegfried, the Twilight of the Gods, and Parsifal. Those are the ones that are obviously a part of the Ring Cycle. If the regular varsity level, probably individually these would not be tossed up, but the Ring Cycle certainly would, the Ring of the Nibelung. And here's the Ride of the Valkyries. Oh, and we're not going to get it, but it's a da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. If you've ever seen Elmer Fudd sing Kill the Wabbit, that is it. It also plays a role in the film Apocalypse Now, when they are in the helicopters near the beginning of the movie about to obviously attack a village in Vietnam. That is what is being played by the character played by Robert Duvall, just blasting Ride of the Valkyries. But it is certainly a spirited work that I encourage you to take a listen to. Da 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 da. And then you have, of course, The Flying Dutchman by Wagner, Tannhauser and Lohengrin, also both of them by Wagner, and then Tristan and Isolde by Wagner. So certainly he is the guy to know for the German opera style. Know especially the Ride of the Valkyries from Die Walküre. Remember, the Valkyries are those Norse kind of women goddesses who escorted the heroes to Valhalla. And of course, the Ring Cycle comes up a lot for Wagner. I remember I was listening to the radio, NPR, maybe about 25, 30 years ago, and they were talking about how for the first time they were going to play a Wagnerian work in Israel. And it was kind of a moving, emotional thing for people because many of those people had heard that music as played to them in the concentration camps and the like. But that is neither here nor there. Wagner also had a relationship with German philosophers that would espouse that sort of German superiority but we're not going to get into it as of right now. In the interest of time, we go to the last guy, and that is Camille Saint-Saëns. And Saint-Saëns is noted for Samson and Delilah, to be sure, but more so than anything else, Carnival of the Animals. And there you can see the Carnival of the Animals here. Is it going to play? Maybe I'll speed it up. Oh, let me move ahead. And I'll be honest, I don't know a lot about Carnival of the Animals. For some reason, I think it was a composition designed for children. But I want to look it up real quick, just for my own edification. So we're going to look up really quickly. Carnival of the Animals. There it is. And it's a humorous musical suite of 14 movements, including The Swan by French composer Camille Saint-Saëns. So 14 movements. Each movement, it looks like, is going to be obviously named for a particular animal, as it were. He prohibited public performance of it during his lifetime, thinking that its frivolity would damage his standing as a serious composer. How about that? But you can read more about it on your own, but you can see here you've got the first section, the March of the Lion, and then it just moves on from there. But each of them, as I said before, named for a particular animal, as it were. So how interesting is that? How about that? I did not know it. And then finally, his Danse Macabre, which, as I've mentioned before, sometimes you get this classical music played around Halloween, and the same here. So there we go. You have heard this before. You will hear it. We're going to speed ahead. So this is Camille Saint-Saëns, Danse Macabre. And it does have that kind of macabre sound to it. So there it is. All right, so that's it for us. We're going to have another installment starting with Edvard Grieg, the Norwegian. But that's all we've got for numbers 16 through whatever it was we went through, 30, as it were. 30 minutes, it seems, there, but certainly you can watch it in double time and slow down when it comes to the parts in which I play the music. Keep studying, and the more that you study, obviously, the better you will get. Thanks.